What's up, everybody? Welcome to the State of Wild, episode 44, a regular YouTube video web series podcast thingy. My name's Meowth, and as usual, I'm joined by Corbettgames. Corbett, how you doing tonight, dude?
Hey, I'm doing okay. I'm on that US sleep schedule, which has been a bit exhausting for one of the community tournaments. But, you know, I've chugged up on Red Bull. I've recovered. I practiced for this in college, and so, you know, I'm good to go. But there's another face with us today. For anyone watching the video, you've already seen it. But let's bring in Roffle, who, you know, was a guest appearance 2 weeks ago, and now has agreed amazingly to join the show permanently. Roffle, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I always have a great time when I'm on the show, and glad to make it a permanent thing. I, too, am on the U.S. sleep schedule, but it's a little bit less exhausting for me, so appreciate Corbett making time to host the show with us and introduce me onto it. Thank you guys both again for having me.
I'm really excited to have Roffle on the show, not only because I feel like you bring a little bit of different perspective every time you're on the show, it's also always a really damn good time when you're on the show, so it's just going to make it a little bit more fun to record the podcast. But today, we have a lot of stuff to talk about, but before we dive into all of that, just a reminder to like, comment, and subscribe if you guys enjoy our content. It's a small thing, but it does actually support us a lot. And we have a lot of news coming down the pipeline, so make sure you guys stay tuned for all of that. But yeah, enough messing around. Let's get right into it. So by the time that this podcast drops, a new Wild Vicious Syndicate Data Reaper report will be out. And so yeah, I kind of just want to start off by talking about it. So the first thing that I want to dive into are the frequency charts that they have. And so basically there are two rank brackets. The first one that I'm going to be showing you guys is the Diamond 4 to Diamond 1. So this is kind of like that Bottleneck 2 legend and what the meta is looking like. And damn, it is all mage. It is all Secret Mage. It's all APM Mage, almost 30% of the metagame. Followed by that, we've got Priest, obviously just Reno and Big. And then we've got a variety of Paladin archetypes, and we'll talk about them in just a little bit. A variety of Warlock archetypes, lots of Murloc Shamans, and then the rest of the 5 classes kind of just don't really exist. And then when we look at the Legend frequency charts, very similar, right? Still pretty much Mage dominated. The archetypes swap a little bit. We're talking about a lot more APM Mage than Secret Mage once we're in Legend. And then Priest, Warlock, Paladin, kind of are the 4 big classes in the format. I just want to kind of open up the floor. What was the big thing that surprised you guys when you guys saw these frequency charts?
Yeah, it's no surprise that Mage is a large portion of the metagame. I think just like this, compared to the other classes, it's a little bit startling to see that much Mage involved. 30% for one class is obviously quite a lot. Corbett and I were talking before the show, and there were some instances where, that frequency has happened before, but there were other classes that were maybe a little bit comparable to that. So yeah, it makes the graph look a little strange seeing that much Mage, but not too unexpected, I suppose.
I think like we said, there have been like previous reports. I remember like report 21 where there was about 27% Mage, but in that instance there was also like 25% Warlock. So what makes this so weird is just that extreme number of Mage compared to everything else, especially at that Diamond bracket, right? Where you're 30% Mage and the next highest class is Priest at 13%. Like, Secret Mage by itself is more popular than any other class. Like, that is wild. So that's the big thing that obviously stood out. And then, there's a couple other things, like the Handbuff Paladin not being as popular as I thought. And then the Tax Paladin actually still being very, very popular, especially at those diamond ranks, even after the post-nerf. So I was a little bit surprised to see that. Everything else, though, is pretty much in line. You never expect to see that much Darkglare Warlock, even at Legend, just because it is a very specialist deck. And so with my experience on ladder, I would say I see it a lot more often. But when looking at the Legend bracket as a whole, it makes a lot of sense to see it, at only about 3% as the second most popular Warlock archetype.
Yeah, and we talked about Tax Paladin. I want to jump in here a little bit just before people, kind of comment on this. All of the data for this VS report was collected watch post and Sword of the Fallen nerfs, right? So this is all post-nerf Tax Paladin. And we'll talk about this in a little bit. That play rate, I think, isn't for nothing. It's still a pretty good deck, which is kind of surprising. Mm-hmm. I feel like a lot of people, myself included, kind of just gave up on Tax Paladin once we saw the watch post nerf just because we were like, 3 health watch post sucks. No, not even worth playing the deck, even though it's it's still pretty damn good. And yeah, Handbuff Paladin, I'm very surprised that it was this low. It does jump up a little bit once you do hit Legend, but still very surprised for like how, I don't know how much I hear it talked about. Maybe it's just because I follow Bodybuilder on Twitter, but for as much as that it's talked about, I feel like it should be a lot more popular.
I think, with Handbuff Paladin in particular, we've seen this in the past where it takes decks in Wild a little bit longer to kind of funnel down the ranks a little bit. So it's not surprising to see it, maybe not as popular at the Diamond 4-1 rank band. But I think realistically, Paladin in general is probably severely underplayed. It's got 3, as we'll see, very viable archetypes that for whatever reason, people don't seem to be playing. You mentioned the nerfs to Tax Paladin. That explains some of the play rate dropping off there. But, in addition to Handbuff Paladin, you've also got Odd, which still a very viable deck, and got some, decent new cards from the expansion and Conviction and Knight of Anointment as well. So it's, Paladin's very good, and I would expect to see the play rates of some of these decks higher, but I guess it's just what happens when the entire metagame is kind of dominated by mages right now, or the popularity of mages kind of pushing people away from other classes, I suppose.
Yeah, looking at the Legend rank bracket, it's not very surprising. Like that flop from Secret Mage to APM Mage being the most popular archetype was something that I kind of expected, and so that wasn't a huge surprise. What did kind of surprise me was the popularity of like Celestial Druid in Legend, and I don't know really what's driving that because, historically it hasn't been a very good deck. Maybe the archetype's going through a little bit of refinement. I know Goku hit Legend with a list running Malleys, but that was a little bit surprising to me. But the rest of it was kind of straightforward and expected. I don't know if there was anything else that jumped out to you as like super surprising.
See, I thought I thought more people, or the play rate of Celestial would be higher at lower ranks, because I think the deck is bait, and I think it has been for a while. I don't think it has strong matchups into many things, especially with the play rate of APM Mage in Legend being so high. I would be terrified to queue that deck into that matchup, and in fact, I spent last month queuing that deck into that matchup, and it is not a fun experience.
Yeah, I guess the alignment's about where I would have expected. I mean, it's fun. It sees a solid amount of play. Like, it's not a terrible deck, but I think it's very flashy, which people like a lot more often than playing something like Odd Paladin, right? People like fun new stuff. So yeah, makes sense.
And there's something to be said about the novelty of it too. Odd Paladin, gains for 2 new cards every expansion. People play it for a bit. Oh, that's right, they're good. The deck's still good. Let's move on to something else. And Celestial Druid is just like, we've spent so long with just the Psych Melon into Aviana-kun combo.
Oh god.
It's kind of it is kind of refresh. Like, I think it's a cool deck. I think there are a lot of fun things you can do with it, but I don't think it's necessarily competitively viable. So I'm a little bit surprised to see it more popular at Legend than the Diamond band.
One last thing that I want to point out here before we hop into the actual power rankings, what I think a lot of people want to see. I want to talk about that third most popular Warlock archetype, that Cutelock, because I feel like that just recently popped up in the past week and a half, after the Chinese meta report came out. And so the data for this VS report was over about a month, and Cutelock saw enough play really in the past, week and a half, 2 weeks to pop up in this meta report, which is kind of insane. And I expect the number to be a lot higher the next time we do one of these reports.
Yeah, the deck is surprisingly good. Like, it really has some explosive turns where it can sneak up on you.
Yeah, it's just aggro druid rebranded, which I'm in for. It's very fun. Like, again, you're talking about that novelty, right? This is something that's very different than anything we've seen. All those 0-cost cards, and you're right. It definitely has popped up so much more over the past week or two. Ever since some of those Chinese reports came out, we got some HS free play info on it. It looked good there, and so there's a little bit of hype for it. And, people are dying to play all those cute little minions, because how could you not? And I'm dying to go kill as many Tiny Fins on ladder as I need to get in my way.
Oh my goodness.
That's okay. Penguins I won't touch. It's fine.
You're a monster. I will say that it, like you mentioned it being like a reskinned aggro druid. It's aggro druid with life tap, right? That's all we really need to say about it. Like aggro druid ran Finley, which was not a very great card, just so that it potentially could get access to life tap, and now you have aggro warlock like a Zudak with life tap, and it's pretty damn good and pretty consistent. But yeah, let's hop into the power rankings because that's really what everybody really cares about. And I'm gonna hop over to the legend power rankings first. I'm gonna read through our tiers for those of you guys that are listening on podcasts, and of course, I probably should have mentioned this at the beginning, but if you're listening on podcasts and you want to see any of the graphs and stuff that we're talking about, there's a link to the Vicious Syndicate report in the description, and so make sure you click that and you'll get access to all these full images as well as the more detailed write-up. But yeah, so Legend Power Rankings Tier 1, by far and away the best deck in the format right now is Handbuff Paladin, and it's not even close. The deck is kind of broken with a 57% win rate, which is absolutely absurd. Second best deck shouldn't really be a surprise. It's Darkglare Warlock sitting at 54%. And then we have a clump of decks here. We've got Secret Mage, Murloc Shaman, Pirate Warrior, and Tax Paladin. Yes, Taxes Paladin, even after the nerfs, sitting at the low Tier 1 threshold. Tier 2, I think this is actually the biggest Tier 2 that we've seen in a very long time. But it's full of a lot of familiar faces. So Odd Paladin, Odd Demon Hunter, Aggro Druid, and then you got the 3 Cabal classes, Arena Mage, Arena Priest. And then Arena Lock is down there, alongside Discard Warlock and Cutelock. And then I don't really want to touch too much on Tier 3, Tier 4, but we have to talk about it because the deck that is the most popular at Legend is actually missing from those top 2 tiers. We have APM Mage sitting here at the top of Tier 3. And I know we're going to get a lot of flack for this, but that's what the stats say, friends. APM Mage, not that good of a deck. It's sitting there with a sub 50% win rate alongside Celestial Druid and Big Priest. Okay, let's just talk about Handbuff Paladin. By far and away the best deck in the format right now. Not even close. The deck is bonkers broken.
Yeah. I was talking with Meowth before the show, and when Tempo Storm came out with their meta report, I thought they were maybe overvaluing Handbuff Paladin. Again, due to the novelty of the deck, it got some flashy new cards. It has a little bit more longevity with the ability to clear the board with Samuro, and then also some more face damage with Conviction and the Chargers. But yeah, it turns out I was wrong. It is the real deal. It's not surprising that it's one of the best decks. It's surprising that it's this far and away apparently the best deck to me at least.
It's insane. The win rate is absolutely mental. It's one of the highest we've ever seen. Wild in the past, in the very early days, did have some of these decks that reached this threshold. But in general, the player base has been a lot more, I'd say, competitive in a sense, over the past couple of years. And the win rates for these top decks don't usually get as high. The fact that it is at 57%, this is the highest win rate that we've seen in a VS report for a very, 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 very long time.
Snip Snap, right? It was the last time we saw something this high.
Even Snip Snap in our Legend data, it was only around 56. So I'm not saying that Handbuff is better, because at the same time, this is a new expansion. There were recently nerfs, and so all the win rates are kind of a little bit possibly inflated. Largely as well because people are playing APM Mage, which is the most popular deck, but not necessarily that strong. But we'll get to that. But yeah, so Handbuff Paladin's insane. The matchup spread is bonkers, where it just beats aggro. It beats slow decks. It does fine into combo decks. The only thing that slows it down is Big Priest, which barely beats it, which is just crap. Big Priest isn't that good anyway. So Handbuff Paladin has an absurd matchup spread. And I thought it was going to be good, but when I saw this, it was like, ooh, what the hell? And so, yeah, sadly, though, with Crabrider getting nerfed, we'll see how it recovers.
Spoilers.
Oh, sorry, spoilers. But we'll see how it goes, The fact that it does have this kind of cushion room to work with means that I really think it could survive 1, if not 2 nerfs and still be insanely good.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. And I think that a big part of its relative strength right now is, as you mentioned, the matchup spread that it has, that it just feels like it has a chance against any sort of archetype with the new tools that it got from the Barons in particular.
Yeah,
and it's so funny. It's so funny that like before the expansion came out, like we were like, oh, unnerf Saronite, it's gonna push Handbuff over the top, and then it doesn't even make it. Like it's not even being played right now. It's just everything else.
I mean, I kind of want to talk about that because a little bit because I feel like the deck is, even at a 57% win rate, it's still kind of undergoing refinement. I know that there's people that are talking about bluegills, Carol Romasing play, Valeniers coming in and out of lists. Like, there's still experimentation within the list, which is kind of scary, right? Spoiler alert, if Crabrider wasn't getting nerfed, I would be kind of scared about how high this deck could potentially become, right? As the lists become refined.
At the same time, I think that like the 28 core cards are pretty established. It's mostly about toying around with those last 2 slots, and I don't think it really matters that much. Like, people play Cults for the APM matchup. They play Barrow for Glare. They play, Cariel for the Mirror. Valenier is like a Reno matchup, and I don't think it actually matters that much because the core of the deck is established really well. Like 28 cards is pretty good. Most decks in general flip around those last couple slots a lot of the time, and so I think this isn't like a unique situation. And no matter what you pick, it doesn't look like we're missing out on some really hidden great card for Handbuff, because Bodybuilder has been trying everything. He's putting out a new list every day with some new spice, and nothing is quite stuck. And so I don't think we're missing something that's insanely good just yet. But it's not like Handbuff needs it, because it's already busted as hell.
Right. I think those 29th and 30th cards maybe, like you said, make a difference in certain matchups, which you can only really rely on when you're at very high legend ranks. And even then, like, you still need to draw those cards. So aside from like specifically attacking for Odd Warrior, which is there is a build that is aimed at that, like, you're not going to draw all of the cards in your deck before somebody wins anyway. So it's like you said, those 28 core cards I think are there or close to it. The last few cards are really, preference or matchup based, and I don't think that those are really what dictate much of the deck's success.
I'm waiting for Bodybuilder to put out a tweet that's running Don Honcho in his list and just see how many people like blindly net deck it. Because he's the Grimy Goons boss, right? He has to be here in the deck now that the Grimy Goons are finally playable. Come on.
I thought you were talking about Bodybuilder being the boss at this point, and I was like, yeah, it makes sense.
I think that's probably more accurate.
All right, let's move on from Handbuff Paladin a little bit, and I talk about maybe the shocker for a lot of people. I know Corbett and I have been talking about this on the podcast for a while, so it's not really shocking to us, but APM Mage sitting as a tier 3, not that great deck, even though it's, the most played deck in Legend.
So I'd be curious to hear Corbett's take on this, because I know he's personally taken it to high Legend. How much of that is that supposed player skill that we hear a lot about for this type of combo deck, especially a fast combo deck? Your decisions early really do matter. And how much of that do you think is the decks around it just kind of pushing it down a little bit? We saw the popularity of Secret Mage kind of returning. What do you think is the reason for APM Mage being as low as it is? Or is it just not a good deck?
I just don't think it's that amazing in terms of like how hostile the meta's been in response, right? Like when I was first playing APM Mage, my win rate was bonkers because Tax Paladin had basically pushed out Secret Mage. Like there was so little Secret Mage in the pre-nerf meta, and there was so little Darkglare actually. Both those decks were really suffering from the Tax Paladin popularity. And so when I was first playing a lot of APM Mage, I felt very comfortable. Like I had a very favorable matchup spread into everything. And then all of a sudden, here we are now, and Secret Mage is one of the most popular decks on ladder. And it's just like a math problem, right? Like, it's such a brutal matchup by itself, where it's 25-75. And it really is that bad. Like, it's a horrific matchup. That for APM Mage to be tier 1, it has to go 55% into the rest of the field. Into the rest of the field, it has to be, like, Darkglare level broken. And it's just not. It's just not that good. Like, it's just not good enough for that. And so I think APM Mage definitely... there is some room, there is some hard turns. It's a tricky deck to play, I think. But I don't think that's the reason why it is where it is. I think the aggro matchups in general, can definitely get improved. But you can't really change a Secret Mage from Explosive Runesing you, no matter what. And so, yeah, I really don't think it's that skill issue. The APM Mage as well, this isn't like that much of a controversial opinion, to be honest, that the fact that it's placed in tier 3, a lot of the EU players that I've talked to have already just dropped it. They're not playing it very much. There's a reason why a lot of people didn't bring it to the tournament that's going on. In planning and stuff, some behind the scenes, like Hijo and I 2 weeks ago were like, do we bring APM Mage? And then we absolutely ended up bailing on that. We were never going to bring it. A lot of other players who I talked to about lineups and stuff, they agreed with that. They were just never going to bring APM Mage because it just doesn't feel that good right now.
I mean, it comes down to what we were talking about last week, where like if you want to beat APM Mage, you can beat APM Mage a very significant amount of the time. I think the reason that a lot of tier list and people that you talk to have such a high opinion about the deck is maybe related to how bad it feels to lose to, right? Like when you lose to it, it feels really bad, right? And so when I'm feeling really, really crappy and I had no chance, that must mean the deck is broken. And that's not necessarily the case. As we're saying, like if you look at the matchup spread for APM Mage, it's not just Secret Mage. I feel like that it's really weakened to. It's weakened to a lot of decks. And so it's never going to hit, Corbett was talking about 55% win rate against the rest of the field. It's nowhere close to that. I think it just feels really bad to lose to. And maybe that's contributing to the sentiment that a lot of people have that the deck is broken.
Yeah,
I remember like in the I remember in the last episode we did Meowth, you asked like what my top 5 decks were, and I said I don't think APM Mage is in there, and so this wasn't that much of a surprise. Like I think like last week I probably would have said APM Mage is like a mid to low tier 2 deck, which is about where it's placed here.
Yeah, and if you look at some of the decks below or around APM Mage in that tier 3 and lower, those decks are not very popular, and a great many of them feel kind of helpless into APM Mage. So it's maybe people that are playing a significant amount of those decks that have those strong emotional feelings towards the APM deck, because when they're in a matchup against it, they're not playing Hearthstone. They have no agency. They have no effect on the outcome of the game, really. And I've played those decks. It doesn't feel good, but I've also played semi-viable, more aggressive decks that either go wide or tall onto the board and make a lot of stats. And it isn't that hard to beat APM Mage with that style of deck or that style of strategy. If you apply pressure and you apply consistent pressure in the early turns, they can't set up their strong plays, is the reality of it.
All right, so we've talked about kind of the two big standouts, I feel like, of the metagame and of our report, right? Handbuff Paladin and APM Mage. Let's just finish talking about tier 1 here. So were there any big surprises to you guys for like the rest of tier 1? We have Darkglare Warlock and Secret Mage is kind of like that mid tier 1. And then at the bottom of tier 1 we had Murloc, Shaman, Pirate Warrior, and Tax Paladin. I don't know about you guys, but Tax Paladin was kind of the big standout to me when we initially saw this data and we had to write the report. Tax Paladin was kind of mind-blowing. I was like, dude, this is still a deck, right? I didn't realize that people were still playing this deck and it was still having this much success. It's a pretty damn good deck. I mean, I think a lot of that might have to do with the fact that Secret Mage is so popular, and Tax's Paladin was kind of broken against Secret Mage. It's why it got initially pushed out of the metagame. And so even a slightly worse Tax Paladin, when stuff like Darkglare and Secret Mage are super popular, probably still a very good meta call.
Yeah, and Call to Arms is still just a very good card at 4 mana.
I think Tax Paladin's win rate is more indicative of the potential that Call to Arms has. There are probably other Paladin decks that are just as strong that aren't seeing play right now, like even something like Murloc, or just a more like a straight up aggro Pally, like without the whole Firewatch Post thing. Call to Arms kind of busted.
Yeah, I'm more surprised about the play rate of it after a pretty significant nerf than I am about the fact that like something built with a similar shell is still being successful. I'm actually, it's not in tier 1, but I'm a little bit surprised by the relatively low play rate for Odd Demon Hunter, given its decent amount of success. I know it's not a flashy deck, but like Demon Hunter is the least popular class in Wild right now, and it still it has a decent deck. So I'm a little bit curious why maybe that's not gaining popularity. I know it's not a flashy deck, and there are other decks that do something similar but maybe a little bit better. So maybe that could be contributing into it. Like even Tax Paladin, for instance, has a pretty similar strategy. But that was a bit of a surprise to me because I knew it was a relatively good deck, but top of tier 2 kind of surprised me a little bit. And then again, the relative play rate of Demon Hunter as a class, given that it has a viable deck, is a little bit surprising as well.
Yeah, I feel like Odd Demon Hunter has very much like the Odd Paladin, even Shaman, Odd Rogue syndrome, where like I don't know, it's just not the most exciting thing, I guess, for a lot of people to play, you know, Gen and Baku decks now that it's, you know, been around for 3 years. But like you said, it's kind of surprising because Gen and Baku decks have always been very, very viable, right? Tier 1, tier 2.
And they haven't gone anywhere. And it seems like people forget that, yeah, having a hero power either upgraded or reduced in cost for the entire game is still very strong. But yeah, I guess I understand that there isn't much changing within those lists, so it makes sense that maybe their play rate is a little bit lower as a result of that.
Yeah, I'm actually... We'll get to it. It's a little bit of foreshadowing, but some nerfs and buffs are coming next week. I'm kind of hoping that they buff something in Demon Hunter to make like Blackthorn Odd Demon Hunter. What's his name? Deathspeaker Blackthorn, the 7-mana guy that dumps all the stats on board. So that I'm not forced to be running like the 5-mana 1/1 death rattle, summon a 5/8, you know, just so that I have odd cost death rattles that are playable.
I mean, it's going to take a lot for a pretty substantial buff for Odd Demon Hunter to want to run a 7-mana card like that. Like, I think that's the bigger limiting factor, not not the strength of the Deathspeaker. It's like,
I'm wanting some buffs to those supporting pieces, because the Blackthorn, even when I was playing at the beginning of the expansion, right, and I was pulling Fugan and Stalag and like the 1/1 and the Albatross, those are my death rattles, and they're really bad. But even then, I had an absurd win rate because I was going Polkelt into Blackthorn on curve, and when you play Blackthorn on curve, no matter what you're pulling from the deck, you're kind of like in an absurd spot. And so I just want something so that I'm not forced to, like, as much as I love Fugan and Stalag, you know, I don't really want to run Fugan and Stalag. I want to run some better cards in the format. So I think it gives us a little bit.
There's no better card than Fugan and Stalag. Come on.
I think Twitch chat would tell you Gruul and Boulderfist Ogre, but
of course, yes,
that's true. That's true. I guess you can't pull them from your Deathspeaker though, so they don't count.
True. And I want to circle back to Tax Paladin before I forget about this, but Roffle and I were talking about this a little bit earlier, where like Tax's Paladin is probably not successful because of the presence of Far Wedgefist. It's popular and strong because of Call to Arms. And so what if we're merging like Nerebar Weblords and like Mana Wraiths instead of the Watchpost, so that you can actually better utilize your buffs, and then you're running, you know, Aggro Paladin that has those tax effects to slow down like the Renos and the Zephs. And I think that might be a better, because even though Tax Paladin is super popular, I'm still super hesitant about 2/3 Watchpost. And so I'm wondering if there's still a lot of refinement that can be going on within that class.
I would caution away from Mana Wraiths. Months ago, when Call to Arms was still 5 mana, I did a Death and Taxes Paladin with Mana Wraiths. I can tell you, if you're hesitant about playing a 2/3 Watchpost, you should be more so about a 2/2 Mana Wraith that like has a negative effect. I think the only disruption you really need is the Nerebar Weblord, because that gives you protection against Secret Mage in particular. They have a lot of Battlecry minions, and that's a popular matchup, obviously. And then it also gives you some breathing room into Reno decks as well. I think that the former is probably more important, again, because of the frequency chart we just saw. The popularity is so important. But I think the only disruption you really need in that deck is Nerebar. You could probably just run eggs, like eggs, or I was playing a Call to Arms deck with Juggler today, and it was incredible. Bringing back the jugglers on the occasional time that I actually brought them out in front. But I think that you just want something sturdy that can be buffed with conviction. So I'd say that eggs is probably a good bet for that. You want, and more importantly, and this is something I've been saying for a while, even before the nerf to Watchpost, is just, I don't know that you want Watchposts in that deck to begin with, because they can't attack. They can't attack. They eat the conviction buffs, and then you just can't apply the pressure that you need to win certain matchups.
So with Tax Paladin, I would definitely agree that the most important part is the Weblord when it comes to that whole disruption package, and what gives it that massive strength into, Glare, Secret Mage. Like, Tax Paladin's matchup spread is really weird and interesting. Where it does well into a very bizarre array of decks. Like, usually some things do great into like just aggro, and then they do well into just combo or control. Like Tax Pally holds its own against everything. Secret Mage, Reno Priest, Darkglare, APM. It's super weird. But yeah, I think like in general, that's totally dead on. Where we don't need the Firewatch post necessarily, and we should be looking at more other different shells with that call to arms. But at the same time, I think this deck is the one that's most going to be suffering once the patch probably happens. Because it is so reliant on that Crabrider to be like the finisher, like the thing that stops that actually wins the game. A little bit more so than Handbuff Paladin. We'll talk into that.
Yeah, even just to swing early boards, it's really important to get that Crabrider either down or pulled from your deck.
Well, I know it'll hurt like the finishing power of Tax Paladin, but I wonder how much it's gonna maybe be helped by a Crabrider nerf, because you can stick your other minions more consistently now that are not.
Yeah.
Right? Like your mini bots and righteous protectors. So.
Right. If every deck's running Crabrider, it's kind of a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, and then let's wrap it up with talking about the rest of Tier 2. I want to touch on that Cutelock, the new archetype that's kind of popped up. It's down here at the bottom of Tier 2. It is nice. I want to preface this. I think it's nice that we have this new archetype with the Cutelock. It's a good deck, right? And you can totally hit good ranks and climb to legend with it. But I am very sad with how Cutelock has reached this playable form. I'm not going to lie to you. It plays like Aggro Druid, and that makes me sad because there's no Hobgoblins and there's no Gandlings, and that's just not my Cutelock that I knew back in the day,
I mean, you're still welcome to play that version of Cutelock, man. It's just that, like, I personally am, after playing the expired merchant version, I was just blown away by how consistent it was in not only drawing its pieces, but like the interaction between specifically expired merchant and the egg is bonkers. Like, what did it really gain this expansion? It gained the 0 mana spell. Like, most of these cards existed. We just missed it. And I think it was because of I don't even know that when I was playing it, at least Ritual of Doom, Bane of...
yeah,
Bane of Doom is a bad card. Ritual of Doom is
I always call it Bane of Doom.
Yeah.
You've had to correct me that like 10 times.
Ritual of Doom. That's good, but that's not that's not the only thing that makes the deck go. A lot of times I was just winning with like layers upon layers of bone webs, or just again doing aggro druid things with a Mark of the Lotus with potential upside. Like, it was I think it was maybe an oversight. Sure, the turning a 1/1 or into a 5/5 is a huge upgrade, but like oftentimes that 1/1 has the potential to be a 3/3 or so anyway. So it's like, in that regard, it's not always that big of an upgrade. But I think it's something that was potentially missed in the past. I don't know that the 29th and 30th card really are what bring it over the top.
I think once they redid the penguin animation, just reinvigorated interest in the archetype. People couldn't look away. But yeah, Cutelock. It's nice to see it here, right? Like, it's nice to get a different deck on ladder, something that we haven't really seen that much. When something pops up that's completely fresh, even if it is like Aggro Druid rebranded, it's such a fun end game where I always had this theory like a couple years back that at some point there was going to be decks that just abused all the zero cost minions, just because zero cost is good. Stuff that's free equals good. And so it's kind of nice to see this play out, and it's kind of a hint to, I think, some of these flood decks that what they're eventually going to be looking like a year or two from now, because eventually at some point Aggro Druid itself, the actual Aggro Druid, is probably going to look similar. Like, I don't know how exactly it gets there, but zero cost stuff equals good. And so yeah, I expect to see something like this maybe down the road as well.
Especially zero cost stuff with a consistent draw engine like you have in Warlock with the discard tools, as well as just like you said earlier, man, with life tap. A lot of decks used to run a lot of aggro decks used to run Finley just on the off chance for a life tap, and you get to start the game with it in Cute Warlock. So
yeah, something life tap is broken. Yeah, it makes a lot of decks better. All right, so that's gonna wrap up our discussion about the VS report. If you guys want a more detailed, explanation about the power rankings and the classes and the decks that are in this report, we highly recommend you guys check out the written report. That the link to that is down in the description below. Corbett and I do the writing for that, and we're not biased at all, but I think the writing is pretty detailed and pretty great. So we recommend that you guys check that out if you guys are interested in a further in-depth explanation. So with that, we're going to go ahead and move on to some of the news of the week, with the big piece coming from this tweet that went out from Alec, the game designer. Had some great balance talks over the last few days. 5 nerfs, 10 buffs in next week's patch. Looking to bring up some underperforming classes and archetypes. There's some spicy stuff. All right, 5 nerfs, yeah, excited. 10 buffs, whew. All right, let's start off with the first part. 5 nerfs. Crabrider has all but been confirmed. That's kind of why we leaked that earlier. Crabrider getting the nerf bat. If I had to put money on a nerf, it's probably going down to a 1/3, just like Watch Post. I don't think that increase in the mana cost is something that they would do to that. Crabrider at 1/3, still playable? Yeah or no?
Yeah, probably. And that seems like a obvious change or obvious potential change, just because it solves a couple problems with the card. First of all, the aggressive mirror board swings, it prevents some of that. You can't trade into a 1/1 and a 2/1 and still retain something on board. So that's like the turn 2 Crabrider is a little bit less powerful, which I think is probably a good thing. There's going from 4 to 3 is a huge breakpoint in terms of removal spells is probably the more important thing, because things like Holy Smite Penance, Medivh Valet, a lot of things take it off the board a lot cleaner than currently do, because 4 is just not something you really consider with your removal spells or even have access to with your removal spell. So like you said, that's probably the most likely nerf, the one that people are expecting. So it's obviously a worse card at that stat line. A lot of what the card does is built around the amount that you get for it for the mana that you pay. And I think that in reality, you get too much out of the card for how much mana you're paying for it right now. And so reducing the stat line is a way to kind of reduce the amount of value that you get from 2 mana.
I don't know just how good it'll be, to be honest. I was thinking about it, I'm like, well, Handbuff probably can get away with it, because, you still get, if you buff up the health anyway, you can still make double value trades and stuff. It's still like a Christology target. I was thinking about it, I'm like, oh, well, they used to consider playing Vicious Scalehide, right? And this card's probably still better than Vicious Scalehide as a 1/3. But I don't know about decks like Call to Arms, like Tax Paladin, whatever that eventually looks like, when that still plays it. It is such a big deal, the fact that it can, get removed. That critical 3 health point that Roffle's talking about, that smite and penance and everything. It is really such a big deal, and so I think this is the nerf. I think it'll be good, because the fact that it's more answerable is great, because it won't snowball and win games instantly. GG on turn 4, if it gets removed a lot more often. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see. I'm not entirely sure, just how it lands power level wise, if they do this expected nerf.
I think the biggest thing with Crabrider is I am not as scared by the coin Crabrider on turn 1 as any sort of slower deck, right? Because like you said, I have more ways to remove it now, and I'm not dead on turn 3, because if I can remove it, then they can't hand up a doll it twice, and then they can't conviction it and kill me. So I'm looking forward to this nerf. I have really built up a hatred of the crab over the past couple of weeks, because I've died to it way too many times. So yeah, really looking forward to this. I think this is all but confirmed. But there are 4 more nerfs, and I want to let Corbett kind of lead off on this, because you're a lot more in tune with the standard metagame than I think both Roffle or I. So what do you think the 4 other nerfs are going to be?
Well, they've already confirmed that there'll be 1 other neutral in addition to Crabrider. And so the only real candidates for that I see are Mankrik and Alex. And I would feel almost certain that they'll be nerfing Mankrik. I don't think Alex... Alex is very, very popular. Both Mankrik and Alex are playing about 33 to 35% of standard decks right now. So very popular as neutrals. But I think that Alex at that rate is okay in a 4 expansion meta. If it still is the big finisher, an expansion from now, that's probably a problem. But I think Mancrick, they're probably just going to tone down the 310 body that you get when you draw the, Olgra? Is that her name? Olgra's, like Mancrick's wife. Instead of making it a 3-turn, they'll probably tone it down to like a 3-6 or a 3-8 would be my expectation. It's just too much of an insane swing. If you Mancrick on 3, and then you get the wife on 3 on like turn 4 or 5, it's so hard to remove in that format.
Right. The body that you get off of the spell is, I've been watching a fair amount of Grandmasters over the weekend, and the body that you get off of the spell, it puts you in this weird situation where you're kind of forced to run the card in even slower decks just because that body that sticks around is so good. It's kind of like a patches situation where you get it completely for free. You get a card, you're not paying a card or mana. You're just paying the upfront cost of the minion. But a 310 just sticks around after going face to trade favorably into the opponent's board. It almost becomes a removal spell at that point.
You just never lose board control, right? Like if you're a rogue and you just get this, it just that wife ends up dealing 12, 15 damage. Like they never take it off the board ever. So it's kind of insane. And it's broken. It's like it's really, 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 really powerful in the decks that can tutor for it and the decks that draw a lot, like Hunter, for example, with Barak. But it's just good in like every other deck. Like its baseline is so high right now because that 310 body is just absurd when you high roll and get it early enough.
I'm very happy that you think that it's Mancrick and not Alex, because how dare they touch my LPG mage,
Yeah, and I think a finisher is like that is like Corbett said, is probably okay at 9 mana. It's a little bit less, I don't know. It just feels a little bit less bad at 9 mana compared to 3 mana on curve. And then you run into the issues of potential variance with the draw order of your deck and when the body comes out. If you're playing an aggressive deck, top decking it the turn after is very different than top decking it after you've lost the board. So it's like it's a card that feels worse than Alexstrasza, which even if Alexstrasza maybe does more in certain decks, it doesn't have the same feelings associated with it, which I think is relevant.
Yeah, so the other 3 class cards, I expect one of them to be Flow. I think Flow is probably going to 3 mana.
Thank goodness.
Thank goodness. Yeah. I thought there was a chance that they probably wouldn't do it because of Mage kind of gets left in a ditch a little bit in Standard if they put Flow to 3. But it's probably still too much of an issue right now in terms of just the, it's a Keleseth, right? It's a very toxic Keleseth at that. And so I think they'll probably do Flow. As for the other 2 class cards, it's actually a little tough to say. Like the fact that it's only 3 class cards makes it tough to guess, I think. There'll probably be another Paladin nerf in addition to Crabrider, just because Paladin is so insane right now. I would expect it to be first day of school, which might come as a surprise. And I think Conviction will probably go untouched, funnily enough. So in our format, that sounds kind of crazy. But I think with a Crabrider nerf, Conviction becomes a lot less of a feels bad. And I think that first day right now is such an outlier in the mulligan in these multiple Paladin decks. They'll probably touch that one instead.
And then for that last one, do you think it's going to be Lucia, Ticketus, or do you just kind of have no idea what it's going to be at this time?
I think it'll be Ticketus. Yeah, I think they're actually going to go do the Ticketus nerf because people just keep playing Warlock. Like, they can't help themselves. It's trash, and Ticketus isn't good, but it doesn't matter because people just want to play Ticketus. And, they've talked about previously in the AMAs that if Ticketus has, like, a high play rate, that's a really bad thing because, it's a very feels bad card for a lot of players. And it just won't go away. It doesn't matter how bad it is. People just keep wanting to tick people. And so I think they're actually going to step in. Reddit riot, you did your job. Well done. You're going to get what you wanted. They're going to finally nerf big bad Ticketus. Keep complaining, guys. It's working so well.
Don't say that. Don't do that.
I'm going to take the opposite stance. I think that the fact that people keep playing it despite it being so bad is probably incentive for them not to nerf it because
it is. Yeah.
Like it's a popular card. People like deleting their opponent's decks, and it's not good. But like I understand that there's a lot of people that feel very differently about that, and feel very strongly about how they feel differently about
very
that.
Strongly.
But it's like I don't think it's again, I don't play standard, but even looking at the meta reports, like the warlock's not good, and Ticketus himself isn't good, so I don't think that is a likely nerf. But I do agree with you on Paladin probably getting something else touched, and I do think that first day of school does make sense, as much as I'd like it to be conviction, because I think that does do quite a lot. But like you were saying, the first day of school in your opening hand is just pretty bonkers in standard from what I've been watching and seeing. And when you have a more narrow set of minions like you do in standard, you can consistently get cards that you shouldn't be able to get in Paladin. Is really the kind of problem with it. Like you can get your flame imps or whatever the high impact class cards are that aren't Paladin cards, or even hitting the Libram cost reduction has a significant impact on the outcome of the game. So I think it's just like maybe another one of those cards that does a little bit too much for what you're paying or not paying for it in that case.
Yeah, there are a couple other candidates that Meowth flagged, like a Lucia. That's possible, but I doubt it. One that I've heard as well is Hysteria. Hysteria addresses Control Priest, which is very much dominant in terms of high legend play and in the tournament scene. So they might, and it also happens to address the Control Warlock problem. Like if maybe they don't have to touch tick to sort of deflate it, kind of hit two birds with one stone. Because Hysteria, busted card at 3 mana, right? Like it's completely busted in our format, it's busted in standard, and so you can kind of hit both things at once with that. But I'm not entirely sure what they'll do for that 5th card.
Yeah, the fact that Hysteria is played so frequently in both Priest and Warlock, in both Standard and Wild, indicates how strong of a card it is, so I could very well see that as well.
Yeah, part of me would be totally down for Hysteria nerf, but also part of me realizes then that's one of the best counters to Darkglare Warlock, and kind of don't want that to be nerfed. But I want to make one point before we to move on to the next point. I do remember from these AMAs where Ixer says it's always good to design cards for that small population of people that like being mean. And what I am getting from these like Ticketus and Lucia riots is that there's actually so many people that love being mean in Hearthstone, right? There's so many of them. And I don't think it's a small population, Ixer. I'm just saying. I don't think it's a small population at all. Okay, but I do want to kind of bring this back to Wild a little bit. So let's say Enchantress Flow nerf, Crabrider nerf, Mankrik nerf, first day of school nerf, and then let's hypothetically say Ticketus nerf, right, for that 5th. Okay, Enchantress Flow nerfs APM Mage or Mizaki Mage or A for Exodia Mage. First day of school and Crabrider both hit Handbuff Paladin. Crabrider hits like pretty much everything else as well. And then Mankrik's not really seeing a ton of play in our format. And then his Ticketus is kind of relevant because it's also pretty bad in our format as well. So how do you guys think that those nerfs are going to impact the Wild metagame? Right, we've had this data from the VS report in front of us, looking at matchup spreads. How do you think that a APM Mage nerf and a Handbuff Paladin nerf are going to affect the Wild metagame? I'm gonna ask you guys to do predictions, right, so that people can come back and point out how wrong we were in a couple of weeks. But what do you think is going to happen to the Wild metagame?
So obviously it depends on what gets nerfed and how it gets nerfed. So we're making a lot of assumptions here. Obviously Handbuff Paladin losing 2 pretty impactful cards. Like they can make great use of first day school in addition to Crabrider, just because it fills their hand so cleanly into the for free into the Smuggler's Run. It's like 0 mana life tap is essentially what it becomes. We talked about how powerful life tap is for aggressive decks. Yeah, there's some variance involved, especially in Wild where you have a wider card pool, but there aren't any like real big whiffs that you can hit because you're changing their like the stat line is less relevant when you're buffing them up. The same thing applies to Crabrider, like Corbett said. If you're buffing it up anyway, like it's going to be a less impactful nerf in Handbuff Paladin, and maybe to a lesser extent Murloc Shaman, where you have the potential to buff up the stats anyway. But assuming they do make it a stat line change, but like you're still weakening cards in what appears to be the best deck in the format. So I think it has the potential to slow it down, but I wouldn't. I don't think that though, unless it's a substantial change to Crabrider, I don't know that those will necessarily knock it out of tier 1. If we're assuming that Encanter's flow gets changed, especially if it goes to turn 3, like, I mean that's a pretty heavy mana investment to not do anything on that turn. Like it's okay to pay 2 mana, do nothing on turn 2. I don't know how I would feel in the current metagame to wait a turn and lose turn 3, giving your opponent another chance to continue developing when you're already likely playing from behind in that deck. So I think that if Encanter's flow goes to 3, I don't think the APM Mage is even gonna be seeing the top of tier 3 moving forward. Like that would be a pretty substantial nerf to the deck. Other ones, I don't think that Ticketus is relevant because you probably shouldn't be running that card anyway. So we can assume that maybe instead, if we're considering Wild, that it's Hysteria. I think that, like we talked about, that would have a pretty big impact on quite a number of decks, right? We're seeing Reno Priest and Reno Warlock a little bit higher than we have in the past, and some of losing another removal tool is going to be a pretty big hit, and Big Priest is running 2 copies of that, so that's going to take a hit as well. But Big Priest has the redundancy in its removal that maybe it can soak it up a little bit better than some of those other classes or archetypes rather.
Yeah, I'm looking at the table, and I'm thinking about the nerfs, and the big thing that I keep coming back away with is, damn, Darkglare Warlock looks really well positioned.
Darkglare, that's kind of what I'm scared about.
Yeah. So with the nerfs that we're talking about, so again, like Roffle said, it really depends exactly what they do, right? Because there's a big difference between first day of school going to 1 mana versus first day of school giving you only neutral minions. Like keeping the cost at 0 is a much softer nerf, and they might do that because it's a very small shift in the power level that might be okay in standard. But if it goes to 1 mana, that's a much, much worse card. And so it does depend on exactly what they end up doing. But yeah, with the APM Mage, like I feel like the APM Mage nerf would be the defining nerf because the deck would die instantly. Like it's gone. Nobody plays APM Mage anymore once flow goes to 3. And then that kind of has a big trickle effect, right? Like Secret Mage, if you ignore the APM matchup, Secret Mage is basically like a mid tier 2 deck. Like that's how hard that matchup carries Secret Mage right now. And so that deck probably drops off a fair amount back to where we saw it in previous Data Reaper reports, where it was kind of like the high tier 2 kind of range. Just that dropping off a little bit. But yeah, so I think Darkglare Walk is obviously the big winner, especially if they do Hysteria. If they do Hysteria, in addition to like Crabrider getting nerfed, in addition to APM Mage, and all that kind of stuff, kind of spooky. Kind of spooky where Darkglare goes from there. But yeah, in general, like the decks that really, really, really punish APM Mage are probably a little bit worse off. The decks that lose to Handbuff are probably a little better off. So that's things like, I suppose, Pirate Warrior. As a deck that currently doesn't do very well against Handbuff Paladin, it can go up, and it does okay, but not amazing into APM, where it's slightly favored. But yeah, it's hard to project exactly. I also think Reno Priest could end up going up as long as they don't touch Hysteria, because if APM Mage goes away, that's a slight issue right now, and the Reno Priest removal lines up so much better into a 1/3 Crabrider. Like Priest above all is probably the class that benefits the most from being able to just smite penance. Don't have to worry about that anymore. Just because it does have those multiple ways to deal 3 damage compared to some other classes.
Yeah, I think I am very scared if, like, the changes that we've talked about, I'm very scared of, like, going back to, like, a Darkglare winner. Like, dominated by Darkglare, and then probably, like, Reno Priest as the best counter to Darkglare Warlock that we kind of currently have. So I'm a little bit scared. Obviously this is without knowing, what other decks might pop up if Handbuff gets worse and stuff like that. But
very speculative. Yeah.
Very speculative. But I don't know, man. Darkglare Warlock's been around for a very long time, and I'm kind of not looking forward to it being like the top dog yet again.
Right, and I was even thinking, if Darkglare does start cropping up again, you can dust off the Tax Paladin, start refining that again, but then you run into the issue where it gets hit pretty hard by a potential Crabrider nerf, because it doesn't have the capacity to buff the stats, or at least the health, which is, what we're expecting the nerf to be when it gets pulled from your deck with Call to Arms or played on turn 2. So you lose a potential finisher once you deny your opponent's turns with the narrow bars. You still need to kill them, and you're kind of lacking in that if you're not able to buff up a Crabrider to swing face a few times.
Just kind of looking at it, maybe Odd Paladin is the deck that might be the benefitter. Like if it keeps Conviction, hypothetically, maybe Conviction still gets hit. We don't know. But if Handbuff Paladin drops off, like that's a really, really bad matchup for the Paladin right now. For the Odd Paladin right now. But if it keeps Conviction, the other stuff gets nerfed. I can see Odd Paladin rising up again. Then again, it's Odd Paladin, dude. Nobody plays that deck, no matter how good it is. So I don't
that's how you hit rank 1 then, right? Nobody else is playing it. Nobody else is taking for it. Easy rank 1.
Yeah.
I don't know. If there's any designers out there listening, or anybody on the balance team, if we could just sneak a Broomstick nerf in with these other 5. I know it doesn't see any play in Standard, but if we could just sneak in a Broomstick nerf, I hit the Darkglare Warlocks, so I can actually play aggro into them. I would love that. Don't think it's ever going to happen. I think we were looking at it the other day. It was like seeing play in 4% of decks, which is a little bit sad. In Standard, I'm kind of insane. It's kind of insane.
Isn't that nuts? Like, we thought that the expansion built around Frenzy, surviving that first damage would have Broomstick everywhere, and it just doesn't matter. It's so weird right now that it doesn't really fit into anything in Standard.
Well,
so
the good decks in Standard are what? Control Priest and Spell Mage, so there's very little minion combat. And then I feel like the Rush Warriors, every minion has Rush anyways, so you don't need Broomstick, right?
Yeah.
Paladin has Crabrider, so it kind of makes sense that it's not seeing a ton of play. But also, and they don't have the huge, stat dump swing turns that we do in Wild. But also, the card is absolutely bonkers. And, oh, God.
Yeah.
That's my frustration. I got no other words for it. It's just,
I think there are a lot of people that share in that sentiment.
All right, so we'll talk about the nerfs again next week once they are finally announced and we can see the initial impact that they're having on the metagame. Buffs I feel like are a lot more up in the air. Don't really know what to expect for buffs. I know that they're talking about buffing up some underperforming classes and archetypes. If I'm looking in Standard, that's kind of like Demon Hunter, Warlock, Shaman as kind of the big ones. I'm not sure if Druid is seeing a ton of play either. So those would probably be the 3 or 4 classes. I'm very hesitant to see Warlock buffs because, I don't know, Warlock doesn't need any help in our format, but I'm excited to see what they do to something like Elemental or Murloc Shaman, maybe. Because Murloc Shaman, I think, it's a very good deck. We didn't really talk much about it today, but it's a tier 1 deck in Legend, primarily because of its matchup into stuff like APM Mage. But if it gets some buffs, be kind of scary. Maybe that's the answer that we need to Darkglare Warlock. Probably not, but I don't know. Do you guys have any expectations for buffs? Things that you would like to see at least?
I talked about this today on stream, but I mean, there are always going to be more bad cards than good cards in any card game. So, throw a dart at a board and you can guess. You have as good a guess as anyone with regard to the buffs. But like you mentioned, there are some classes that are honestly kind of struggling right now in Standard. I think I would be shocked if Shaman didn't get something because it seems borderline unplayable right now. Demon Hunter is not having a great time either, so there's probably something there. But again, there's so many cards that aren't being played that it's hard to kind of lean towards something other than just expecting certain classes to get a little bit of a boost. I think that Meowth, what you mentioned earlier with the Death Rattle Demon Hunter, that's an archetype that they clearly wanted to be a thing, but the relative power level isn't there, so that could be something that we see. And then, like you said, Elemental or Murloc Shaman, something in Shaman. Just general Shaman. All of Shaman cards could probably use some sort of buff or another, otherwise it would be more playable in the format.
Yeah, the nerfs compared to buffs, there's such a difference information gap where, it's very easy to see what's broken and what needs fixing, but it's a lot harder to predict like, oh, what future archetypes they're gonna want to support. There's a mini set about to come out, and like Roffle said, there's just so many more cards that could easily get buffed. So like you said, the shaman stuff has to get better. So a very common one that I've seen, I think, is I think it's called Tidal Surge, the deal 4 to a minion lifesteal, or whatever that card is. That can go to 3 mana potentially as a decent removal, healing, and shaman. Something else I've seen floated a lot is buffing the old gods. None of the old gods really see that much play in standard right now, which is a bit of a shame, right? Because they're these big iconic things, and right now Yashar sees a very small amount of play in like warlock and druid decks. Cthulhu is seeing play, but it's bad. Like, people shouldn't be playing it, and they'll be cutting it. Yogg, not really that good. And Azoth as well, not really seeing any play right now, and hasn't really since the tip deck got nerfed. And so I think all 4 of those cards could get buffed in small but crucial ways. So I think that, I know it wouldn't quite be, that the timing might feel a little strange because they weren't in this expansion, right? So they've been out for a while. But I think that would be a cool thing to bring back the old gods, to buff all the old gods in addition to some of the other things going on.
I mean, that's a pretty good point. The fact that the 4 old gods that were 1 expansion removed from them, we had a rotation, and these cards still aren't being played in standard. It kind of indicates where they are when you compare them to the previous iterations of the old gods, where they were a relevant force, and some of them in wild still are, in the form of like N'Zoth, for instance, and for a while that version of Yashara. Like, they're just not. It's shocking that this soon after a rotation, this soon after their release, those big hitters aren't relevant at all.
Yeah. It's a shame, right? So I think they could do things like put Cthulhu to like 1 less piece, or N'Zoth to give the minions taunt that it resummons. Like, to just make it more impactful on the turn that it is played. And so that'd be really cool.
I would also be very surprised if they didn't hit stuff like Frenzy, right? Because we were just talking about this, where, I mean, this whole expansion is centered around Frenzy as the mechanic, and we were talking about the Broomstick not really relevant, and that some of that might be because the Frenzy cards just aren't that great. I don't know of any off of the top of my head that are seeing a ton of play in standard. I don't know if, I mean, Corbett, you're the standard guru, and Roffle, you've been watching GM. Like, I don't know if there's any Frenzy cards that are actually seeing play outside of, like, are there any in the Control Priest deck? I don't even think so.
Yeah, aside from Samuro,
Samuro, yeah.
True.
Yeah, like, the concern with the Frenzy cards and why I think they're relatively weak isn't necessarily things that are like on the cards themselves or even the Frenzy effect. It's like, the baseline set of the cards. Like, their stats are fine for the most part. Their mana cost is not the issue. It's the effect, the payoff. Like, there are very few where I'm excited about getting the Frenzy proc. So other than retooling some of those effects, I don't know how you could correct those cards, because, like, from memory, the only cards that I felt like good about the Frenzy on are Samuro and the Pirate that draws me a card, because I just like drawing cards. But even then, like, I don't know, I'm not too broken up about that, because it's just like, if it doesn't go off, because it's a decent card on its own. So a lot of the Frenzy cards are just piles of stats that then don't really have much of an upside when you do get them to proc, has been my experience, at least.
Yeah, so last time we did buffs like this, we got 2, right? We got Totem, Goliath, and Willow from memory. Yeah, so Goliath was supporting the Totem Shaman archetype that that'd been kind of establishing, that hadn't really done anything for a bit. And then Willow didn't really have enough support around it, but we still had seen Dreadlord just printed. So trying to think of some like underperforming, not played too many archetypes. And I think, like what Meowth said, Murloc Shaman and Alley Shaman specifically, those are probably the 2 that I could definitely see getting like very direct support pieces upgraded for sure. But like you said, it could be anything. Like, throw a dart. Exactly. There's so many options here, and 10 buffs. That's so many. Like, it's actually an insane amount. It's kind of a mini set in a way. So yeah, it should be fun.
Yeah, I'm looking at stuff like Murloc, even Shaman. You've got the Death Rattle Demon Hunter, the Frenzy Warrior. Like, I know Rush Warrior is like a very popular strategy, but like Frenzy was the brand new mechanic. They have this whole legendary that's like, I think he's super important in lore. I don't know anything about the lore, and like Frenzy cards just aren't good enough. So maybe some of the warrior specific pieces, but then also the like the self mill Warlock deck. I know Kibler's been doing really well with it, which is weird. But Kibler also does really well with a bunch of jank. So I'm not sure how well that deck actually is looking in the dev stats. But I could see that getting like a really significant upgrade as well.
In my experience with that deck, I think that the cards themselves are powerful when they're online. It's just like you don't have enough payoff tools has been, I think, the limiting factor for it. So I could see that being an archetype that if they print more cards for it, that it's like in the mini set, for instance, it gets its support that way. I don't think they necessarily need to ratchet up the power level of the cards, other than I don't know, Nero's kind of weak, but just because it takes up a board slot and is, we saw it with the Quest Warlock. It's just not like a strong payoff. It's stronger in standard, I suppose. But I think that in general, it could be anything, but definitely Shaman.
Yeah. All right. So I'm excited to see what they do. I think we're getting our patch notes probably like on Tuesday, and then the patch on Thursday would be my expectation. So I'm excited to see kind of how it shakes up. Not only standard, but I'm also excited to see like these nerfs and buffs geared towards standard. I'm excited to see how they change the WoW format for better or for worse. All right, so that's going to wrap it up for kind of our news. Ixar had a Q&A yesterday, but there was nothing really big or significant, I think, in terms of news. I know there was the whole like Baron's Mysteries that kind of dominated the Q&A for a little bit, so nothing too great about the Wild specific front. And then our last little piece of news here, for those of you guys that don't know, Zeddy is hosting a Wild community tournament. It's started on Friday for an NA and an EU tournament. It's going on top 32. Yours truly, below me, Corbett, is in that top 32. Congrats. That'll be streamed tomorrow on Zeddy's channel. Corbett, do you want to talk a little bit about the experience and how it's going? I know you're playing at 2 a.m. your time, so maybe not so great, but
yeah, it's been all right so far. It's very, I don't want to be overly critical at the same time, because like it's a community driven tournament and that's cool and it's nice when we get those. I think the format was decided as if there were going to be a lot more players, and well, it's a significant number. Like there's nearly 150 for the NA. The format just doesn't quite work, and so it's a very weird situation where people kind of. Well, I guess I don't have to get into the details, but either way, it's a little strange so far. But I snuck in, got through the top 32, and now it goes to a much more traditional, like single elimination. Just win your way to the end. I do have Lothos on my side of the bracket, which is very.
You're not
spooky.
making it, dude. I'm sorry, bud. You're not making it.
Yeah, I looked it up though. I think we meet in the top 4 hypothetically. If we both, if I high roll and he does his job, then we both meet in the top 4. So that would be fun as well. But yeah, I got a little spooked when I saw his name, and I had to like double check. I'm like, wait, how close am I meant to play Lothos? Who's one of the strongest, probably the strongest WoW player for anyone unaware, playing on the EU server. But yeah, it's been fun. I had a really fun time prepping for the whole tournament, and it'll be exciting to get it on stream. Saw some cool personalities casting it, and yeah, looking forward to all that. I guess it'll be going on live probably when the podcast comes out.
Yeah, I think it starts at noon Eastern time. I believe it's the same time on Sundays that it's been the other 2 days. So if you're interested in all of that, make sure you guys check out Zeddy's stream. He'll be doing that live coverage of the tournament. And good luck, Corbett. You got this. I fully expect to be recognizing you as the winner. You gotta repeat back to back.
No pressure.
Wild Open champ. Yeah.
No pressure.
No pressure at all. All right, but that's going to wrap it up for our episode this week. Appreciate all of you guys for listening. And Roffle and Corbett, thank you again for joining us. Roffle, especially you, new permanent co-host. Welcome, friend. I hope you had a good first official episode.
I, as always, had a great time. So thank you both once again for having me join up and making this a regular thing.
Yeah. And let the people know where they can find you if they're living under a rock and don't know who Roffle is.
Yeah, so you can find me at Roffle HS on both Twitter and Instagram, and then Roffle on Twitch and YouTube.
And make sure you guys check out his content. Awesome person, awesome content. And then Corbett, speaking of awesome, where can the people find you?
Guys, you can find me at Corbettgames on Twitter and Twitch and YouTube and all that stuff. So that's Corbettgames. But yeah, very, very hyped. Thank you guys for listening and making it to the end of the ep. I'm sure you guys are excited as I am that Roffle will be joining us here from here on out. So thank you again. And thank you for, tuning in, watching, listening, and hope you have a good one.
Yeah, we appreciate all of the support for, what is it now, 44 episodes of the podcast. I think when we initially started out, I was not expecting to go for more than 5 or 6, and now we're here at 44, and I have 2 brand new great co-hosts. It's pretty awesome. You guys can find me YouTube, Twitch, Twitter at GetMeOut. We appreciate all of you guys listening to the end of the episode. We hope you guys have a good one. I hope you guys are looking forward to the nerfs and buffs and experiencing the new meta, and we will see you guys next week. Later.